Hello, I'm the Daily Storyteller, and I'm here to keep you company today. If you've visited my channel before, welcome back. And if this is your first time, I'm so glad to welcome you to the world of stories. I know many of you use these videos to relax or to help fall asleep more easily. So get comfortable, let your body relax, and allow the gentle sound of rain in the background to wash away your stress and worries. In this video, you'll hear chilling stories, most of them based on true events, told with honesty and depth. If you enjoy this content, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Now then, let's begin. Story: The Ghost on Appalachian Peak. Hello. If you're lying awake in the dark right now, maybe this will help you settle down, or maybe it will make you more restless. My name is Daniel, and for the past 3 years, I've lived alone on a piece of land deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It's a place I inherited from my great-aunt, a quiet, private woman who never left the mountain in her entire life. When I first arrived, I thought I'd found peace, a refuge from the chaos of the world. The air was crisp, the trees tall and endless. But the mountains have their secrets, and soon I discovered they don't like to share them freely. Strange things started happening. At first it was small noises, rustling in the underbrush, shadows that didn't seem to match any animal. Then things got worse. The feeling that I was being watched settled over me like a thick fog. One evening I went out to check my trail cameras. I'd set them up hoping to catch footage of deer or maybe a bear. The sun was already dipping below the horizon, painting the sky a dull orange. But as I walked, I realized something was wrong. No matter which way I went, I kept passing the same tree, the one where I'd mounted my camera. It felt like I was trapped in a circle I couldn't break. I sat down against that tree, heart pounding, throat dry. The cold crept under my skin. And then the tears came. I started to cry softly, scared, exhausted. There was something out there, watching me, waiting for me to give up. I felt eyes burning into the back of my neck. I remembered an old story my great-aunt told me once about skinwalkers. Creatures that could change shape, take the form of animals or even people to hunt and confuse their victims. I laughed it off back then, but now I knew better. My head spun. My balance betrayed me. It was as if the forest was twisting around me, trying to keep me lost. But then, desperation gave me clarity. If I tilted my head sharply into my shoulder, like I was listening for something, I could walk straight again. I took slow, careful steps, one after another, holding my breath. Behind me I heard soft footsteps, pacing, restless, angry. When I finally reached my cabin, I slammed the door and locked every bolt I could find. I didn't leave the house for days. These creatures don't just mess with your mind, they imitate animals too, coyotes mostly. My cameras showed that after I left, a lone coyote would follow the exact same path home. It was no coincidence, so I set traps. Simple snares smeared with white ash, an old protection technique passed down through generations. The next time I checked, the traps were destroyed, twisted beyond recognition. The air smelled faintly of burning hair. It was a warning. You can't fight these things head on. I told James and Cole, my 2 friends back in town, that hunting them was a bad idea. But they didn't listen. They came prepared, packing silver bullets, spotlights, and even white ash. We set out just as the last light faded from the sky. The forest around us came alive with unseen eyes, dozens of them, and then Cole disappeared without a trace. James started breathing weirdly, guttural, harsh, like he was choking on something. Panic surged through me. I ran. The trees seemed to mock me, their shadows dancing in the dim light. I made it back to the cabin, breath ragged, heart pounding like a drum. I locked myself in the upstairs closet, clutching a bleeding wound on my arm, the blood dark, almost black. Now, I'm writing this in the dark, praying someone finds it. The creatures are still outside waiting. I don't know how long I'll last. If you're listening, please send help. Please. Days bled into nights without distinction. The wound on my arm throbbed relentlessly, black blood seeping beneath the bandages no matter how often I changed them. The cabin's walls felt like they were closing in, shadows stretching longer, darker, as if alive. I barely dared to move, trapped in a cycle of fear and exhaustion. Power flickered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness more than once. Without light, the forest's whispers grew louder. Footsteps circled the cabin, slow and deliberate, echoing through the night like a predator's stalking rhythm. One evening, a tapping came at the window, soft, rhythmic, impossible to ignore. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Peeking through the cracked curtain, I saw it. A pale face, framed by tangled hair, eyes like voids reflecting the moonlight. No human I knew. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. When I dared glance again, it was gone. The skinwalkers were no longer just watchers. They were hunters. Voices started to fill the silence, soft whispers that mimicked mine, begging me to open the door. My own voice, distorted and weak, pleading for mercy. But I refused. The door shuddered under heavy blows, the cabin trembling with every impact. Low growls vibrated through the floorboards. I knew then that confronting them head-on was suicide. I climbed to the attic, cramped, dusty, full of relics my great-aunt left behind. Among the cobwebs, I found her journals, yellowed pages filled with warnings. She called the creatures shadow walkers, cursed beings bound to the mountain, feeding on life and sanity. She wrote of silver and ash, yes, but also of a rare herb, nightshade's breath, said to banish the curse if burned at its source. Hope flickered in the darkness. At dawn, I set out to find the herb. The forest seemed to close around me, silent but watching. After hours, I found a cluster of dark-leaved plants, their flowers glowing faintly under the overcast sky. As I gathered them, a woman emerged, gaunt, pale, eyes hollow with despair. "Help me," she whispered. "They took me. The curse. It's alive." She led me deeper, through tangled paths, until we reached a clearing scorched black, the earth broken and writhing. From the shadows rose a mass, dark and pulsating, the heart of the curse. I lit the herbs. Smoke poured, thick and choking. The shadow hissed, twisted, recoiled. The woman screamed, shifting into a monstrous form, sharp teeth, elongated limbs. The skinwalker I hoped to save was the source of the darkness. Horror gripped me. The curse trapped souls, twisting them into monsters. I fled, leaving the fire to burn. Back at the cabin, the weight lifted, but my arm flared with pain. I collapsed, vision swirling. When I woke, dawn bathed the room. The wound was closing, but the whispers continued. The footsteps remained. The mountain still watches, still waits. If you come here after dark, beware. Not all ghosts seek peace, some seek prey. Story: the haunting of the skinwalkers. They say the mountains don't forgive, that they remember every wrong, every scream, every soul that vanished beneath their shadows. I never believed in such stories until the night I crossed paths with the skinwalkers. My name is Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, I've been drawn to the Appalachian wilderness. As a wildlife photographer, I chased beauty and solitude in the remote corners where few dared to venture. But some beauty hides darker secrets. I had heard whispers from locals, old-timers warning me of creatures that stalk the night, shapeshifters that prey on the lost and the foolish. Skinwalkers, they called them. Legends passed down through generations, told in hushed tones around campfires. I dismissed it as folklore, stories to scare children. That changed the moment I set foot beyond Pine Ridge. The forest was alive with eerie silence, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced between the trees like restless spirits. I was setting up camp near an abandoned hunting cabin, a place locals avoided. As darkness swallowed the woods, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath misted in the cold air, and a strange sensation prickled the back of my neck, like unseen eyes watching, waiting. Suddenly, a low growl echoed, unnatural and guttural. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound, but the beam caught nothing, just empty trees swaying in the wind. Then I saw it, a figure, tall and gaunt, emerging between the trunks. Its skin looked stretched tight over bones, eyes glowing faintly amber. It didn't move like any animal I knew. It stepped forward with uncanny grace, limbs bending at impossible angles. I froze, heart pounding as primal fear rooted me in place. The creature opened its mouth, releasing a chilling, inhuman hiss. It began to shift, its form blurred and melted like smoke, reshaping into a snarling wolf, then a man with twisted features. I stumbled back, tripping over roots, desperate to escape. But the forest was no longer familiar. Paths twisted and turned endlessly, and every direction led me back to the cabin, trapped in the skinwalker's maze. For nights, I evaded their hunt. They mimicked voices of loved ones, luring me into the dark. They corrupted the forest itself. Trees groaned with unnatural sounds. Shadows clawed at my sanity. My camera, my only witness, captured glimpses, distorted faces, flickering eyes, shapes impossible to explain. I sought refuge in ancient rituals, circles of ash, silver talismans, whispered prayers. But each night they found me. I lost time, lost hope. Now, as I write this by a fading candle, I hear them outside, their whispers creeping beneath the door. If you find this, know the truth. The skinwalkers are real. They haunt these mountains, hungry for souls. And if you wander these woods after dark, beware, because they are watching. The nights dragged on like endless shadows, each one darker and colder than the last. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by a restless dread that settled deep in my bones. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Walls closing in, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. They came every night. The skinwalkers, I learned they didn't just hunt the body, they hunted the mind. Each encounter chipped away at my sanity, twisting reality into something unrecognizable. One evening, as twilight bled into night, the forest fell silent, too silent, the kind of silence that presses heavy, suffocating, promising something terrible is near. I lit a fire in the hearth, its flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The wind outside whispered through the cracked window panes, carrying voices, soft, urgent, and chillingly familiar. I heard my name. The door rattled, a slow, deliberate pounding. My heart seized. I grabbed the silver knife I'd found in an old chest, an heirloom said to repel evil, and held it tight. The pounding stopped. A cold breath brushed my neck. I spun around. Nothing. Then, from the corner of my eye, a figure emerged. Tall, thin, with eyes like molten gold. It wore the face of my father, long gone, but its smile was wrong, twisted and cruel. "Come with me," it whispered, voice like wind over dead leaves. I refused. The figure's face contorted, melting into a snarling beast. It lunged, claws scraping the floor. I slashed wildly, the silver blade catching the creature's arm. It hissed, recoiling into the shadows. The cabin shook as more skinwalkers gathered outside, their voices rising into a maddening chorus. I knew then that they were stronger together, feeding off each other's power and my fear. Desperation drove me to the attic, to the journals of my great-aunt. Hidden within her writings, I found a ritual, a last hope. It required the rare herb, Nightshade's breath, burned at the heart of their curse. At dawn, I ventured deeper into the forest, heart pounding with every step. The woods seemed alive, watching, waiting. I found the glowing flowers near an ancient stone circle, their scent thick and sweet. As I gathered the herbs, a shadow fell over me. A woman appeared, her skin pale, eyes hollow with sorrow. "You cannot save us all," she warned. "The curse consumes. It binds the lost to the mountain." She led me to a clearing scorched black, where a writhing mass pulsed, darkness made flesh. I lit the herbs, smoke curling into the air. The mass shrieked, twisting as the fire consumed it. The woman's form shattered, revealing the monstrous skinwalker beneath. Horror seized me. The curse trapped souls, twisting them into monsters bound to the mountain's dark will. I fled. Now, back at the cabin, the weight has lifted slightly, but the shadows remain. The whispers never stop. If you come here, beware. Not all ghosts seek peace. Some seek prey. And the skinwalkers are still hunting. Story, the curse of the blood pumpkin. They say some seeds carry more than just life. Some carry darkness that takes root deep in the soil and grows alongside the plants. I never believed it until I planted the blood pumpkin. My name is Walter, and I've been a farmer all my life. The land is in my blood, and every autumn I compete at the county fair, trying to grow the biggest pumpkin. For 5 years running, my neighbor David Decker took the blue ribbon. His pumpkins were monsters, almost unnatural in their size and shape. One crisp morning at Reggie's vegetable stand, the man with a crooked smile and stories that always made you uneasy pulled out a bundle of brittle, ancient seed packets. He said they came from his grandfather, brought back from Germany after the war. "Blood pumpkins," he whispered, eyes dark. "They're not like ordinary seeds. They need a sacrifice to grow." I laughed at the idea. Foolish superstition, I thought. But the curiosity gnawed at me. For a joke, maybe, or just to try something new, I bought a packet. I planted the seeds in the east field, where the sun hit just right. alongside my usual crops of corn, beans and squash. Most of the seeds sprouted strong and green, but one was different. The seedling was dark, darker than the others, its leaves wilted and oddly twisted. I named it Fritz, half mocking, half admiring. Weeks passed. The farm was alive with summer growth. One afternoon, while pruning around Fritz, I accidentally nicked my hand with the shears. Blood dripped onto the soil, thick and red against the dry earth. The next morning, I swore the pumpkin had grown overnight. Fritz was bigger, swollen, the color deepening to a blood orange, unlike any pumpkin I'd ever seen. I thought it was just a coincidence, but then it happened again. Every time a drop of my blood touched the soil near Fritz, it seemed to pulse, growing faster and larger. I started cutting myself deliberately, small nicks to feed the pumpkin, whispering promises of greatness. It was an obsession. Neighbors stopped by, drawn by tales of the enormous pumpkin. Word spread, and soon people came from miles away to see Fritz, a monstrous gourd towering over everything else in the field. But the excitement was tinged with fear. At night, strange noises drifted from the east field, rustling, growls, whispers that didn't belong to any animal I knew. Lights flickered deep in the woods, shadows moved against the moonlight. The air grew thick with something unseen but heavy. And then people began to vanish. David Decker disappeared first. One evening, he came by to see Fritz. We argued. I told him to stay away, warned him of the curse. He laughed and walked into the field alone. No one saw him again. His truck was found abandoned at the edge of the forest, but there was no sign of David. Rumors started swirling. Talk of dark magic, of sacrifices, of the pumpkin feeding on more than just water and soil. I wanted to believe it wasn't true. I wanted to run from the nightmare growing in my own field. But Fritz was no ordinary pumpkin. It was a curse that demanded blood. The days after David disappeared were like walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The farm felt colder, as if the life was draining from the air itself. People stopped coming, the whispers of the blood pumpkin turning from fascination to fear. Even my wife, the only one who stayed by my side, grew distant, her eyes shadowed with worry and something I couldn't name. I tried to focus on the harvest, but Fritz dominated every thought. The pumpkin grew at an unnatural pace, swelling to monstrous proportions, its surface rippling like a living thing. At night, I swore I heard it breathing, slow, heavy, and haunting. One night, I woke to a rustling sound outside. Heart pounding, I grabbed the lantern and stepped into the cool night. The field was bathed in pale moonlight, the giant pumpkin looming like a beast ready to strike. Then I saw movement, shapes creeping among the corn stalks, shadows twisting and stretching. They weren't animals. Their eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light, and their twisted limbs moved with unnatural grace. I stumbled back, fear paralyzing me as the creatures circled Fritz, their claws scraping the earth, whispering in a language older than the mountains. The pumpkin pulsed, and from its base, thick vines snaked out, wrapping around the creatures like serpents, pulling them close. It was a grotesque dance of life and death. Days later, my wife vanished. She had gone to gather vegetables from the garden but never returned. I found her basket overturned, squash and beans scattered, and strange markings on the ground, deep claw marks circling in a pattern I couldn't decipher. I searched the woods, screaming her name, but the forest only answered with silence. Despair crushed me. Fritz was no longer just a pumpkin. It was a beast demanding sacrifice, feeding on the blood of those who came too close. Neighbors began locking their doors, leaving town in droves. The county fair officials cancelled the pumpkin contest, unwilling to invite the curse into their celebrations. I was left alone, caretaker to a nightmare that grew bigger every day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood at the edge of the field, watching Fritz glow in the fading light. The pumpkin was now taller than my barn, its surface cracked and pulsing with an eerie red light. I knew what I had to do. Armed with an axe and a heart heavy with sorrow, I stepped into the field, ready to face the curse, to end the blood pumpkin's reign of terror once and for all. But as I swung the blade into its flesh, the ground trembled beneath me. Vines erupted, coiling like serpents, wrapping around my legs and arms. The pumpkin's voice echoed in my mind, seductive, cruel. You cannot escape. The sacrifice feeds me. And soon you will join the others. My struggles grew weaker as the vines dragged me down into the dark earth. My last sight was the monstrous pumpkin, towering and terrible, pulsing with dark life. They say the farm lies abandoned now, swallowed by the wilderness. The blood pumpkin remains, a silent sentinel waiting for the next sacrifice. And if you ever find yourself near the east field at night, beware, because some curses never die. Story: The Hinterkek Farm. Murders. March 31st, 1922. A day that shattered the quiet, pastoral calm of Hinterkek, a secluded farmstead nestled deep within the dense forests some 40 miles north of Munich. The dawn was cold and heavy, with a grey sky that seemed to weigh down the hills and fields around the village. But no one could have anticipated the horror that would soon be uncovered within the weathered walls of the Gruber farmhouse. The Gruber family, Andreas, the patriarch, and a respected farmer in the community, his wife, Kazila, the matriarch, their children Victoria, young Kazila, and Joseph, along with their loyal maid Maria, had all been violently taken in the dead of night. 6 souls erased in an act so savage and brutal that the very earth seemed to recoil at the memory. Days had passed with an unnatural silence hanging over the farm. Neighbors grew uneasy, whispers spreading as no one saw or heard from the family. Smoke no longer curled from the chimney. The usual sounds of daily life, chickens clucking, children's laughter, footsteps on the worn dirt paths, were gone. It was as if the farm had been swallowed by shadow. When authorities finally arrived, they were met with a scene that would haunt them forever. The farmhouse was a macabre tableau. Blood soaked the wooden floors and splattered across walls, mingling with the overturned furniture and broken belongings strewn in chaos. The air was thick with the metallic scent of death and the stifling presence of violence. Andreas Gruber lay nearest to the door, his face unrecognizable beneath layers of shattered bone and torn flesh. A blunt object had been used with merciless force, fracturing his skull in a grotesque display of rage. Beside him, his wife Kazila's fragile body bore similar marks. Broken ribs, shattered face, her final moments undoubtedly filled with terror and pain. Their children were no less brutalized. The youngest, a mere toddler named Joseph, and his sister Kazila, barely 7, were found in the same room, innocent victims of unimaginable cruelty. Victoria, the eldest daughter from a previous marriage, lay sprawled across the floor, her body battered beyond recognition. Maria, the maid, had also fallen prey to the killer's fury. Her face was frozen in a silent scream, a haunting testament to the horror she endured. This once warm and bustling household had been transformed into a chamber of horrors. Investigators scoured the property for clues. The killer or killers had not fled immediately, but seemed to have stayed on the farm for days after the murders, using the family's food and supplies. The calculated brutality suggested someone familiar with the household, or at least with an intimate knowledge of farming life. Suspicions quickly fell on those closest to the family. Was it a bitter family feud that erupted into violence? Andreas was known to have contentious relationships with some neighbors and even relatives, but no concrete evidence linked anyone from the family to the crime. Others whispered of a personal vendetta, an unknown grudge harbored by a stranger seeking revenge. The possibility of an outsider who planned and executed the killings with cold precision unsettled the village further. As the investigation dragged on with no leads, Hinterkek grew colder, its residents retreating into their homes, wary of what lurked in the shadows. Books and newspapers chronicled the grisly events, but the true answer remained elusive. The case became one of those unsolved mysteries that gnawed at the public imagination for decades. Who could carry out such a heinous act? What dark motives drove them, and why had they lingered like a spectre among the ruins of their victims' lives? As the days turned into weeks, the village of Hinterkek found itself swallowed by a chilling silence that no one dared break. The once lively community was now a shadow of itself, haunted not only by the gruesome murders, but by the unsettling knowledge that the perpetrator was still unknown, still at large. Investigators combed through every inch of the Gruber farmstead. Yet, despite their thorough search, the crime scene yielded few tangible clues. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints leading away from the house, and no weapon was ever found. The brutality of the attacks suggested rage, but the calculated way the killer, or killers, stayed in the house, using the family's resources, painted a disturbing picture of cold-bloodedness and control. Speculation ran rampant. Some locals whispered about a family feud, recalling rumors of bitter disputes between Andreas Gruber and his neighbors. However, nothing concrete ever surfaced to confirm this. Others believed the murders were the work of a stranger, a wandering menace who chose Hinterkek for its isolation. Among the villagers, fear grew. Doors were bolted tight, and the woods surrounding the farmstead were avoided as if cursed. The police presence was heavy, yet it brought little comfort. One night, as the full moon cast long shadows over the village, a series of strange occurrences deepened the mystery. Lights flickered in the abandoned farmhouse. Eerie sounds, footsteps, muffled voices, the creak of doors were reported by passers-by. Some claimed to see fleeting figures moving behind shattered windows, while others spoke of a cold presence that seemed to linger around the property. These unsettling phenomena gave rise to new theories. Was the killer still nearby? Had restless spirits of the victims returned, trapped by their violent deaths? Or was something even darker at work, something that defied explanation? Years passed and the Hinterkek murders remained unsolved. The case became a chilling legend, inspiring books, documentaries, and countless whispered tales. It serves as a grim reminder of the darkness that can dwell within the human soul, and the shadows that may never lift from a quiet village forever changed by terror. Story. Vanished before. 9/11. September 10th, 2001. A seemingly ordinary day in the heart of New York City, just hours before a tragedy would forever scar the world. Dr. Snee Phillip was a woman of quiet determination and relentless ambition. Born in a small town in India, she had always dreamed of making a difference on a larger stage. Through years of sacrifice, long nights, and unwavering resolve, she had earned her medical degree from the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine. She was a rising star at Cabrini Medical Center, Manhattan, known among her peers for her compassion and steady hands in the emergency room. That morning, she left her modest apartment in Battery Park City with a list of errands. She was seen on security footage walking into a local grocery store, picking up routine items, milk, bread, vegetables, the mundane acts of daily life. To any casual observer, there was nothing remarkable about that moment. But for those who knew her, it was the last glimpse of a woman who would soon vanish without a trace. Her colleagues noticed her absence by the end of the day. The hospital staff, accustomed to her punctuality and dedication, grew concerned when she failed to show up for her evening shift. Attempts to reach her by phone were unsuccessful. Family and friends were soon drawn into a desperate search, filing missing person reports and contacting authorities. Yet their pleas were quickly overwhelmed by the unfolding nightmare of the next day. On September 11th, the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center shook the nation to its core. Rescue operations, media coverage, and public attention focused entirely on the unfolding disaster. In the chaos, individual disappearances like Snee's were tragically overlooked, relegated to the background amid the devastation. But those who loved her refused to let her story be buried. As investigators pieced together her last known movements, a complicated portrait of Snee emerged. Beneath her professional exterior lay a woman grappling with personal demons, a history of alcoholism that she fought quietly and fiercely, a solitary struggle that few were aware of. There were records of a minor legal incident, a shoplifting charge at the very grocery store she was seen visiting the day she disappeared, a desperate act born perhaps of emotional turmoil. Speculation grew. Did Snee choose to vanish? Was she fleeing from the pressures of her demanding career, from the weight of her hidden struggles? Or was something more sinister at play? Then, scattered reports surfaced that challenged the official narrative. Eyewitnesses claimed to have seen her after the attacks, a woman matching Snee's description spotted wandering near a Manhattan hospital, another glimpse near the East River. These sightings were dismissed by some as mistaken identity, but they fueled hope and revived questions. Her apartment, located mere blocks from Ground Zero, showed no signs of damage from the collapse, deepening the mystery. No remains matching her DNA were found in the debris. Despite years of investigation and countless interviews, Snee Phillip's fate remains an enigma, a haunting void in the tapestry of 9/11's countless stories. Her disappearance is a chilling reminder of how tragedy can obscure personal pain and mystery, how a single life can slip silently into the shadows, leaving behind only questions that echo through time. Weeks passed after the devastating attacks on September 11, 2001, but Dr. Snee Phillip's disappearance remained a haunting mystery. Her name, once full of promise and ambition, was now whispered with a mix of sorrow and confusion among friends, family, and law enforcement alike. At first, the official presumption was grim yet straightforward, that Snee had perished in the collapse of the Twin Towers. Her apartment's proximity to Ground Zero seemed to confirm the worst. Yet as rescue workers sifted through the wreckage, no trace of her, no personal effects, no remains, surfaced. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. This absence of evidence sparked uncertainty. Police launched interviews, canvassed witnesses, and checked hospital records, but the trail grew cold quickly. Rumors and second-hand accounts began to surface. A nurse at a Manhattan hospital recalled a disheveled woman appearing days after the attack, eyes hollow and spirit broken, wandering the sterile corridors as if searching for something lost. Taxi drivers remembered a lone woman late at night near Battery Park, desperately trying to escape the city's chaos. Some swore it was Snee, others doubted. Each tip was pursued, each lead examined, yet none yielded concrete proof. The puzzle remained unsolved. Meanwhile, those closest to Snee wrestled with the complexities of her life. Behind the poised, competent doctor was a woman quietly battling her own demons. Her struggle with alcoholism, concealed beneath a professional facade, had left cracks in her personal life. Records showed a prior arrest for shoplifting, a desperate act that revealed the pressure weighing on her shoulders. To some, this suggested a possibility. Could she have chosen to disappear, to shed her old life and start anew somewhere far away from the trauma, the expectations, the pain? The idea of voluntary disappearance was difficult to reconcile with the silence she left behind. No messages, no calls, no sign that she wanted to be found. Dark speculations grew among the community. Had she been victim to something even more sinister? The chaotic aftermath of 9/11 created conditions ripe for exploitation. Human trafficking rings, taking advantage of the city's distracted and vulnerable state, were known to prey on those on the margins. Was Snee abducted, swept into a hidden nightmare beneath the city's surface? Others whispered of a tragic accident or foul play unrelated to the attacks. Perhaps someone who wished her harm and used the chaos as a cover. Her family's heartbreak was profound and enduring. Her mother kept Snee's room untouched, clothes folded, books unopened, a single photograph framed on the bedside table. Family gatherings were marked by moments of silence, by eyes cast down, by unspoken prayers for answers that never came. Colleagues and friends organized vigils, lighting candles in hospital corridors, sharing stories of the bright, compassionate doctor who had vanished without a trace. They spoke of the woman behind the white coat, vulnerable, complex, human. The investigation continued in fits and starts, hindered by lack of evidence and the overwhelming magnitude of the 9/11 tragedy. Years passed with no resolution. The story of Dr. Snee Phillip became one of the many untold tragedies shadowed by history. A poignant reminder that amidst monumental events, individual lives and mysteries can be lost in the rubble. Her fate remains suspended between hope and despair, memory and oblivion. Until new light breaks through the darkness, her disappearance remains an enduring enigma, a silent echo of a life interrupted. Story: The Embalmed Head in Pennsylvania Woods. It was a frigid December afternoon in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and lingers long after you've come inside. A teenage boy, seeking solace from the monotony of everyday life, had wandered off the familiar path. The back roads here were seldom traveled, bordered by dense woods and leaf-strewn clearings that whispered with forgotten secrets. About 30 feet from the nearest worn trail, something caught his eye, an object unnervingly out of place amid the decay of winter's grip. As he moved closer, a sense of dread crept over him. There, half hidden beneath a blanket of dead leaves, lay a severed human head. But this was no ordinary crime scene. The head was embalmed with a level of skill and care that betrayed the hand of a professional. Despite exposure to the elements, the skin retained an eerie softness, the features remarkably intact. The eyelids were gently closed, while the mouth hung open, frozen in a silent scream of terror or agony. Law enforcement was quickly notified, and a team of forensic experts descended on the site. The meticulous nature of the decapitation was immediately evident. The cut had been made with surgical precision, clean and deliberate, unlike the brutal hacks typical of violent homicides. The investigators found evidence that the perpetrator, or someone involved, possessed detailed anatomical knowledge. The neck skin was carefully peeled back and folded, indicating an understanding of human anatomy far beyond that of a common killer. But the horror did not end there. Upon closer examination, the victim's eyeballs were missing, removed with delicate care. In their place rested small, bright red rubber balls, the kind children use in play. A grotesque mockery, a chilling signature that left the detectives unsettled and searching for answers in the darkest corners of human depravity. The victim's identity was a mystery. Isotope testing traced the woman's travels over the previous months, revealing a life marked by movement across several states: West Virginia, Western Maryland, Southern Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, and New York. The evidence suggested a nomadic existence, perhaps seeking refuge or fleeing danger. Despite extensive outreach, no missing persons matched the description. Her age, estimated between 50 and 80 by the forensic team based on the grey hair and dental work, did little to narrow the search. The police and medical examiners speculated that the victim likely died of natural causes. Cardiac arrest was the leading hypothesis, based on trace medications found in her system. Yet the macabre display of her severed and embalmed head painted a different picture, one of possession and obsession. Rumors swirled through Beaver County. Some whispered of black market dealings in human remains, of gruesome collectors and traffickers who traded body parts in shadowy circles. Others feared darker forces at work, malevolent entities lurking in the shadows of the rural woods. As the investigation stalled, the embalmed head became a grim symbol of unresolved terror, a silent sentinel watching over the forest floor, a haunting reminder that some secrets refuse to be buried. The discovery of the embalmed head in the quiet woods of Beaver County rippled far beyond the immediate shock. The community, already gripped by fear and confusion, found itself haunted not only by the gruesome evidence, but by the haunting silence that followed, the silence of unanswered questions and unresolved terror. Investigators threw every available resource into unraveling the mystery, but each step seemed to lead deeper into darkness. The head had been embalmed with remarkable skill, preserving its features in eerie detail, yet the very process that had kept it intact also became a barrier. The embalming fluid had degraded much of the DNA, making identification through modern methods nearly impossible. Dental experts pored over her teeth. Many had been repaired, filled, or even replaced multiple times, indicating someone who had access to regular dental care, yet none of the dental records matched any known missing persons. The forensic artist created detailed facial reconstructions, hoping to jog a memory or prompt recognition, but the trail remained cold. The precision of the decapitation chilled even the most seasoned examiners. The clean surgical cut suggested the hand of someone with extensive anatomical knowledge, perhaps a medical professional or someone trained in mortuary practices. Pathologists compared the method to infamous historical crimes where killers displayed expertise in anatomy, heightening fears that the perpetrator was not just violent, but calculatingly methodical. Rumors spread through Beaver County like wildfire. Theories ranged from the plausible to the macabre. Some believed the victim was part of a cult, her head preserved as part of a ritualistic act. Others whispered of a collector in the shadows, one who harvested human remains to satisfy a twisted obsession. The most chilling rumors pointed to the black market trade in human body parts, a hidden world of illegal commerce that defied the veneer of ordinary life. Funeral homes and mortuaries were questioned, their records scoured for anomalies or unexplained disappearances. Yet no connection emerged. The authorities even shared details at national conferences, hoping to tap into wider networks of information, but no breakthrough was forthcoming. The victim remained nameless, a ghost among the living. Her severed, embalmed head became a silent witness to a crime that may never be solved. It was locked away in a forensic lab, its presence a grim reminder of humanity's capacity for darkness. Locals steered clear of the woods where the head was found. Children dared not venture near, and adults crossed themselves when passing the old trails. Stories of curses and restless spirits grew, and the once peaceful forest became a place of dread. Years later, the case still lingers in the public imagination, a haunting enigma wrapped in the cold Pennsylvania winter. It's a reminder that beneath the surface of quiet towns and gentle landscapes, shadows sometimes move, silent, patient, and waiting. Some mysteries, it seems, refuse to rest. Story: the mysterious car mechanic's son. Aaron Whitaker wasn't like the other kids in town. While they spent their afternoons playing games or chasing dreams that seemed too big for their small lives, Aaron's world was made of metal, gears, and the hum of engines. His father, Henry Whitaker, was a humble auto mechanic who had spent decades running the family repair shop on the edge of town. A modest building smelling of oil and rubber, a sanctuary of sorts for Aaron. Henry was a man of few words but immense skill, respected by locals for his honesty and craftsmanship. But despite his steady hands and tireless work ethic, it was Aaron's mind that held the real power. The boy was a prodigy, an enigma wrapped in the quiet exterior of a child who never sought attention. School was a different story. Aaron was often alone, caught between admiration and suspicion from his classmates. Rumors whispered about his family, about his mother, Marin Whitaker, the genius engineer who had vanished years ago, leaving behind a legacy shrouded in mystery. On an overcast afternoon, the air thick with the scent of rain, the small town's world shifted. Marshall Greystone, the formidable CEO of Greystone Motors, rolled into town in a sleek black car that gleamed like a dark star. Known for his cold ambition and cutting-edge automotive innovations, Marshall was the kind of man who saw people as tools to be used or discarded. He brought with him a challenge, a prototype engine unlike anything the industry had seen, a 12-cylinder marvel of power and complexity, promising to revolutionize automotive engineering. But the engine was temperamental, impossible to tame. Marshall's arrogance was palpable as he strode into Henry's repair shop, casting a disdainful glance at the modest tools and dusty corners. "I want that engine fixed," he declared, voice sharp and commanding, "and I want it done by someone who can actually get the job done. None of my top engineers have succeeded." The shop fell silent. The tension was thick. Then eyes turned to Aaron. Marshall's gaze landed on the boy with a sneer. "What's your name, kid?" Aaron, he replied calmly. Marshall smirked. Well, Aaron, consider this your chance. Fix this engine and I'll grant you a full scholarship to the Whitaker Institute for Mechanical Innovation, a place only the best belong. The town buzzed with disbelief. The Whitaker Institute was legendary, a dream almost unattainable. The idea that a mechanic's son from their tiny town could earn a place seemed laughable, but Aaron's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. He accepted the challenge without hesitation. Days turned into nights as Aaron immersed himself in the engine's complexities. Blueprints sprawled across the workbench, parts dismantled and studied, calculations scribbled on scrap paper. Failure greeted him time and again, but he pressed on, driven by something deeper than ambition. His hands moved with a grace and intuition beyond his years, connecting wires, adjusting valves, balancing components with a precision that made the engine hum with new life. On the final evening, under flickering fluorescent lights, Aaron's heart pounded as he turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, smooth, powerful, perfect. Marshall's scowl froze, disbelief flickering across his features. But the victory was more than just mechanical. It unlocked a door to a past Aaron had barely dared confront. The secret of his mother, Marion Whitaker, whose disappearance had cast a long shadow over the family and the town. As the engine's steady pulse echoed through the night, Aaron realized this was just the beginning. The workshop was thick with the metallic scent of oil and burned rubber, but Aaron hardly noticed. The steady hum of the engine he had just revived was drowned out by the storm raging in his mind. The triumphant roar echoed not just through the small, cluttered space, but through the corridors of his family's buried past. Marshall Greystone stood nearby, a rare flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. "Kid, you've done what none of my best engineers could. This isn't just an engine, it's a revolution. You've earned more than a scholarship, you've earned a seat at the table." But Aaron's mind was elsewhere, far from the polished floors of Greystone Motors. This victory was a gateway, a chance to uncover the truth about his mother, Marion Whitaker, a woman whose brilliance was matched only by the mystery surrounding her sudden disappearance years ago. Marin had been a visionary engineer, the creative force behind groundbreaking designs that could have reshaped the automotive industry. Yet, just as her career was poised to soar, she vanished without a trace. The company sealed the case quickly, dismissing questions and erasing her legacy from public view. To Aaron, the silence was deafening, a void filled with whispers of corporate conspiracies and veiled threats. With the scholarship as his shield and key, Aaron began delving into Greystone Motors' shadowed archives. Night after night, he sifted through faded blueprints, encrypted emails, and confidential memos, piecing together a narrative that painted his mother not just as a victim of disappearance, but as a potential threat to powerful forces within the company. Among the papers, Aaron found a chilling note. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like her." The words sent a cold shiver down his spine, but they only steeled his resolve. One evening, after hours of research, Aaron returned home to find his workshop violated. Drawers yanked open, tools strewn across the floor, and worst of all, files containing his latest findings gone. On the wall, scrawled in jagged letters, was a warning: "Stay away or vanish." Fear clenched his heart, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce determination. The stakes had shifted. This was no longer just a battle of engineering prowess. It was a fight for truth, for justice, and for his family's name. Marshall's cold gaze followed Aaron's every move. a reminder that the boy from the small town was now a pawn, and perhaps a threat, in a game far larger than he had imagined. Aaron knew that uncovering the secrets of Greystone Motors might cost him everything: his safety, his friendships, even his life. Yet, with every piece of the puzzle he uncovered, he grew more certain that the answers to his mother's disappearance lay within the heart of the company that had swallowed her. The road ahead was dark and treacherous, but Aaron Whitaker was no ordinary boy. He was a son of engines, a seeker of truth, and a force to be reckoned with. Story: the turning point in Lee Tiu Ka's life. Lee Tiu Ka's village was a place where time seemed to move slower, where the traditions of centuries were etched into every stone path and whispered through the bamboo groves. Nestled between the emerald hills and the winding river, the village was a haven of simplicity and ritual, where life was measured in seasons and sacred customs. From the moment she could remember, Lee Tiu Ka had been taught to honor her ancestors, to uphold the dignity of her family, and to fulfill the roles expected of her: dutiful daughter, supportive sister, devoted wife. Her days began before dawn, with the scent of incense curling in the morning light as she joined her family in prayer at the ancestral altar, their voices blending in soft chants that connected them to the past. By day, she managed the family's small shop, a place that was more than just a business. It was the heart of the community. Villagers came not only to buy goods, but to exchange news, share stories, and seek counsel. Lee Tiu Ka's gentle smile and patient listening ear made her beloved, but inside her spirit ached. In the quiet moments when the shop was still, she would gaze out the window toward the distant city skyline, where buildings pierced the sky like glass mountains, and life pulsed with endless energy. The city's promise was a siren song that stirred something deep inside her, a yearning for freedom, for change, for a life that was hers to choose. Yet, such dreams were dangerous. To stray from the path meant risking disgrace, breaking the delicate balance between respect and rebellion, safety and self-discovery. Then came the day that shattered her world. A stranger arrived, his presence sudden and unsettling. He carried the weight of stories untold, a past intertwined with her own in ways she had never imagined. His eyes held secrets of betrayal, loss, and hidden truths that had lain dormant beneath the surface of her life. Their meeting was charged with tension, the air thick with unspoken questions. He spoke of her family's history, of choices made and sacrifices buried, and of a future that demanded courage she had yet to summon. Lee Tiu Ka felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The walls of her familiar world began to crumble as she faced the realities that had been kept from her. The lies woven by those she trusted, the shadows cast by silence. Her heart battled between fear and hope, tradition and desire. Friends noticed her growing distance, the way her eyes sometimes glazed over with thoughts far away. Her family whispered worries behind closed doors, sensing the storm gathering within. The village, once a place of certainty, now felt like a cage. And Lee Tiu Ka stood at a crossroads, the turning point where the past's hold loosened and the future's uncertainty beckoned. A moment where the woman she was met the woman she must become. Would she choose the comfort of the known, or step into the unknown to claim her own destiny? The answer lay ahead, in the shadows and light of a life transformed. The days following the stranger's visit were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations for Lee Tiu Ka. The secrets he unveiled were more than mere whispers from the past. They were chains binding her to a destiny she had never asked for. She found herself torn between loyalty to her family and the fierce desire to carve out her own path. Each morning she rose with a heavy heart, the weight of expectation pressing down on her like the humid summer air. The village watched her closely, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. To many, Li Ka was no longer the obedient daughter, but a restless spirit, one who questioned the unspoken rules of tradition. In the quiet moments, she reflected on her dreams, the city's distant lights shimmering like promises just beyond reach. She yearned for freedom, for the chance to rewrite her story. But freedom came with a price. Her family resisted the changes stirring within her. Conversations turned to arguments, old wounds reopened. The balance she had once maintained began to fracture. The man who had once been a pillar of support, her father, warned her of dangers unseen. "There are things better left buried," he said grimly. "Paths not meant to be walked." Yet the stranger's revelations echoed louder. He spoke of hidden betrayals, of sacrifices made to protect secrets that could destroy everything. He urged her to be brave, to embrace the truth, no matter how painful. Li Ka's resolve hardened. She began to push against the boundaries, seeking knowledge, allies, and strength. She reached out to friends beyond the village, ventured into the city's embrace, and discovered parts of herself long suppressed. But the past was never far behind. As her world expanded, so did the dangers. Shadows lurked in places she thought safe. Whispers followed her footsteps. The price of defiance grew steeper with each passing day. Standing at the crossroads, Li Ka realized that her turning point was not just a moment, but a journey. A path fraught with peril, sacrifice, and the possibility of transformation. Would she have the courage to walk it? The answer lay ahead, in choices yet to be made and battles yet to be fought. Story. Whispers in the labyrinth. Beneath the centuries-old city, hidden from the eyes of everyday life, lay a labyrinth. A twisting maze of stone corridors and shadowed chambers that had been sealed away long ago. Its origins were lost to time, swallowed by myths and half-forgotten stories whispered among scholars and locals alike. Some said it was built to trap a terrible evil. Others claimed it was a gateway to knowledge that mankind was never meant to find. Eleanor, a historian driven by an insatiable curiosity, had spent years piecing together fragmented clues about this labyrinth. Her obsession had cost her friends, strained her family ties, but she could not abandon the quest. For her, this was not just history, it was a calling. On a night thick with fog and the scent of rain, Eleanor found the hidden entrance behind a crumbling wall in the oldest part of the city. The heavy stone door bore intricate carvings, serpents intertwined with celestial symbols, faded but still formidable. As she pushed it open, the creak of iron echoed like a warning bell. The air inside was cold, damp, and smelled of decay and earth, pressing in on her like a physical weight. Her lantern's flickering flame threw erratic shadows that seemed to dance on the walls, transforming ancient inscriptions into living threats. Stepping into the maze, each footfall echoed endlessly, swallowed by the cavernous halls. The labyrinth was a labyrinth not just in structure, but in spirit. It seemed to breathe, exhale cold whispers that curled around Elena's mind. Soft voices drifted from unseen corners, faint at first, like the murmurs of the wind through cracked windows. But they grew, weaving together into haunting melodies, words in languages both familiar and alien. They promised secrets that would unlock the mysteries of life and death, power to change fate itself, but warned of consequences too terrible to imagine. The walls were adorned with murals, peeling and cracked, depicting scenes of sacrifice, ritual, and cosmic battles between light and darkness. Symbols that seemed to writhe and shift under her gaze, teasing her with meanings just out of reach. Eleanor's heartbeat quickened. Her thoughts raced between excitement and dread. Was this discovery the breakthrough she had dreamed of, or a trap set by forces beyond human comprehension? As she moved deeper, the labyrinth revealed its cunning. Corridors looped back impossibly. Doors appeared where there should be none, and shadows stretched into figures that vanished when looked at directly. A sudden cold brush against her skin made her spin, but nothing was there. Yet the feeling of being watched persisted, invisible eyes tracing her path, judging her worthiness. Every whisper in the dark seemed to seep into her soul, a seductive temptation to surrender, to lose herself in the maze's endless embrace. Eleanor realized with growing horror that the labyrinth was not merely a prison or a puzzle. It was a living entity, feeding on curiosity and fear, ensnaring those who dared to seek its truths. Escape was no longer certain. Every step forward pulled her deeper into the labyrinth's dark heart, where shadows waited, secrets lurked, and the boundary between reality and nightmare blurred. Eleanor's lantern flickered, casting elongated shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls as she ventured deeper into the heart of the labyrinth. The whispers that had once been faint grew louder, twisting into voices, sometimes pleading, sometimes mocking, each word laced with an unsettling mixture of promise and threat. The air thickened, charged with an unseen energy that prickled her skin and quickened her breath. At every turn, the labyrinth seemed to shift, corridors rearranging themselves as if the maze itself were alive and intent on trapping her forever. Doors appeared where none had been moments before. Familiar paths dissolved into unfamiliar hallways. The walls seemed to pulse with a rhythm in sync with her racing heartbeat. Suddenly, Eleanor found herself in a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness and walls inscribed with ancient glyphs that glowed faintly, bathing the room in an eerie, otherworldly light. In the center stood an altar, cracked and worn, draped with faded cloth and strange artifacts. As she approached, the whispers converged into a clear, chilling voice, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. You have come seeking knowledge, but knowledge comes at a price. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch the altar, a surge of cold fire shooting through her veins. Visions flooded her mind, ancient rites, forgotten gods, souls lost to the labyrinth's hunger. The labyrinth was not just a maze of stone, it was a prison for something dark and hungry, feeding off those who dared enter. Eleanor realized that the whispers were the labyrinth's way of luring her deeper, seducing her with secrets and tempting her to surrender. But to give in meant losing herself, becoming another lost soul wandering the endless corridors. Summoning every ounce of will, she tore her gaze away and turned to flee, only to find the entrance vanished, replaced by endless walls. Panic surged as the voices intensified, twisting into screams that echoed through the stone. But amidst the chaos, Eleanor found a sliver of clarity, a memory of a riddle, an ancient phrase she had uncovered in her research. Whispering the words aloud, the walls trembled, and a hidden passage creaked open, revealing a narrow path bathed in soft light. With renewed hope, she stepped forward, knowing the labyrinth would not release her easily. Each step was a battle against shadows that clawed at her mind, illusions that threatened to drown her sanity. As she emerged from the darkness into the cool night air, Eleanor gasped, the city's lights twinkling in the distance, a beacon of reality after the nightmare. But the labyrinth's whispers lingered, a haunting reminder that some doors, once opened, never truly close. Story: The Curse of the Blood. Pumpkin. Walter had always been a man of the earth. For as long as anyone could remember, he had worked his family's farm, his hands calloused from years of tilling soil and nurturing life from the ground. Each autumn, the county fair was the highlight of his year, a chance to showcase the fruits of his labor. But year after year, the blue ribbons slipped through his fingers, claimed instead by his neighbor David Decker, whose pumpkins grew monstrous and almost otherworldly. David's victories were the talk of the town. His pumpkins towered over the competition, glowing with an unnatural sheen that made others' efforts pale by comparison. Walter, though bitter, admired the spectacle until one day fate introduced him to Reggie. Reggie was an old vendor with a crooked smile and eyes that held shadows. At his vegetable stand, he produced a small, brittle packet of seeds, yellowed with age and wrapped in ancient paper. "Blood pumpkins," he whispered, voice low and rough. "Not like any you've seen. They grow with sacrifice. Give them blood, and they'll grow beyond your wildest dreams." Walter laughed it off. An old man's superstition, he thought. But something in Reggie's gaze unsettled him. Curiosity and perhaps desperation won over skepticism. He bought the seeds, planting them in the east field alongside his usual crops. Walter watched them sprout. Most grew as expected, but one seedling stood apart, darker, twisted, with leaves curling oddly at the edges. He named it Fritz, half in jest. Weeks passed. One afternoon, as he pruned near Fritz, Walter accidentally nicked his hand. Blood dripped onto the soil, dark and vivid against the dry earth. The next morning he found Fritz swollen, nearly doubled in size overnight. Unease settled in his gut. Yet the pumpkin's growth was mesmerizing. Day after day, he fed Fritz small drops of his blood. The pumpkin seemed to respond, pulsing and expanding with a life all its own. But with Fritz's growth came shadows. Strange noises, soft whispers, scraping sounds haunted the farm at night. Animals avoided the east field. Neighbors reported eerie lights flickering among the crops. Then came the disappearances. David Decker was the first to vanish without a trace. His truck found abandoned at the edge of the woods, but no sign of the man himself. Walter's obsession with Fritz deepened even as fear clawed at him. The pumpkin grew monstrous, towering and grotesque, its surface rippling like a living creature. Its vines twisted like serpents, creeping closer to the house each night. Walter realized the terrible truth. Fritz was no ordinary pumpkin. It was a curse, a dark force that fed on blood and demanded sacrifice, and it was far from finished. As the chill of autumn deepened, the monstrous pumpkin named Fritz consumed Walter's every waking thought. The vibrant orange behemoth now towered over the farmhouse, its skin glossy and veined with sinister dark streaks that pulsed faintly under the silver light of the moon. The vines had spread, snaking through the fields like living serpents, their tendrils creeping ever closer to the house's foundation. as though eager to claim new territory and new victims. Night after night, Walter's sleep was broken by strange sounds. Whispers slithered through the air, barely audible but insistent. A chorus of voices both beckoning and warning. The rustling of leaves turned into soft footsteps, phantom movements lurking just beyond his sight. On occasion, a low guttural growl would rumble from the darkness, freezing Walter's blood as he sat bolt upright in bed, heart pounding in his chest. Walter tried to push aside the creeping dread that took root inside him, but Fritz demanded more blood, more sacrifice. What began as small cuts on his hand grew into raw, bleeding wounds. Despite the pain and infection creeping in, Walter found himself compelled, a slave to the pumpkin's dark will. Every drop of blood he spilled nourished Fritz's unnatural growth, fueling the curse that bound them. The disappearances began as faint rumors, but quickly turned into grim reality. The townsfolk whispered of missing neighbors and travelers, people last seen near Walter's farm or the twisting country road that skirted the cursed field. The heavy-set boy who lingered too long near Fritz was gone. Late-night wanderers vanished without a trace. The air in the town grew thick with unease, but fear silenced questions and turned suspicion into whispered dread. One storm-lashed night, lightning tore through the sky as Walter awoke to a haunting sound. The soft, wet snap of vines crawling over wood. Rushing to his window, he saw tendrils of thick vines slithering over the porch, reaching hungrily toward the house. Panic surged, but his body moved sluggishly, trapped by the invisible threads of the curse. Grabbing his old axe, Walter plunged into the darkness, hacking desperately at the advancing green tentacles. His strikes echoed in the rain-soaked night as the creature writhed and recoiled, emitting a sickening gurgling sound, like the moan of a dying beast. Blood splattered across the ground, mingling his own crimson with the dark sap that oozed from Fritz's wounds. Despite his efforts, the dawn revealed an even more colossal Fritz, its flesh healing instantly, vines twisting with renewed vigor. Exhausted, bleeding and broken, Walter understood the horrifying truth. Brute force could never defeat the curse. Fritz was eternal, an ancient evil that thrived on sacrifice and suffering. As the county fair began, crowds gathered, drawn by the spectacle of the world's largest pumpkin. They marveled at Fritz's immense size, unaware of the dark hunger that pulsed beneath its skin. The pumpkin stood as both marvel and menace, a beacon of prosperity and dread intertwined. Walter's health waned, his mind haunted by visions of those lost, consumed by the relentless appetite of Fritz. The pumpkin's tendrils crept ever closer to the town itself, whispering promises of growth and power to any foolish enough to listen. The curse had awakened, and its hunger was insatiable. Story. The vanished village of Hinterkeck, nestled deep within the shadowed folds of dense Bavarian forests, some 40 miles north of Munich, lay the village of Hinterkeck, a place where time seemed to stand still. For centuries, the villagers had lived simple lives, tending to their farms, raising families, and weaving tight bonds of community that sheltered them from the outside world. The houses, weathered by the passage of time and draped in creeping ivy, stood as silent sentinels over the winding dirt roads. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a constant reminder of nature's watchful presence. Children played in the fields, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves. Elders gathered around hearth fires, sharing tales of ancestors and spirits that protected the land. But beneath the surface of this pastoral idyll lay secrets long buried, whispers of ancient rites, forgotten grudges, and shadows that stretched beyond the tree line. One night, a silence unlike any other descended upon Hinterkek. The usual chorus of nocturnal life, the chirping of crickets, the hoot of owls, the rustle of small creatures, faltered and ceased. A cold stillness pressed upon the village, thick and suffocating. When morning broke, the villagers awoke to an unthinkable sight. Homes stood empty, doors wide open, hearth fires cold and unlit. The people who had shared those walls the night before were nowhere to be found. Livestock roamed untended. Personal belongings lay scattered as if abandoned in haste. Panic and confusion gripped those few who remained, or those who arrived soon after to find the deserted village. Search parties scoured the surrounding woods, calling out for loved ones, but found nothing except eerie silence and footprints fading into the undergrowth. Rumors began to ripple through nearby towns. Some spoke of a darkness that had descended on Hinterkek, a malevolent force that had swallowed the village whole. Others whispered of ancient curses, of spirits angered by forgotten transgressions. Eleanor, a determined anthropologist with a passion for uncovering forgotten histories, was drawn to the tale. Years after the disappearance, she traveled to Hinterkek, hoping to uncover the truth behind the village's sudden vanishing. Stepping into the overgrown streets, Eleanor felt the oppressive weight of history and mystery. The forest had begun reclaiming the village, trees breaking through roofs, vines strangling stone walls, moss blanketing the cracked cobblestones. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something more, an intangible dread that prickled her skin. As she moved deeper into the ruins, she heard faint whispers carried by the wind, unintelligible voices that seemed to echo from the past. Shadows shifted in the periphery of her vision, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Elena knew that Hinterkek held secrets darker than mere disappearance. Something ancient, something hungry, still lingered in the woods, watching, waiting. What had happened here, and what price had been paid to silence the village forever? The deeper Eleanor ventured into the ruins of Hinterkek, the heavier the silence became, not just the absence of sound, but a suffocating presence that seemed to press against her chest with unseen hands. Every step crunched on brittle leaves and shattered stones, echoing like a lament in the vast emptiness. As dusk fell, the shadows lengthened, twisting into grotesque shapes among the ruins. Elena's lantern flickered uncertainly, casting wavering light onto walls carved with ancient symbols, glyphs of protection, warning, and something darker she could not yet decipher. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the broken streets, carrying with it whispers, faint voices that seemed to rise from the earth itself. She stopped, heart pounding, as the murmurs grew louder, chanting in a language lost to time. The air around her thickened, and the forest beyond the village seemed to close in, the trees bending like sentinels, guarding a terrible secret. Eleanor found herself drawn toward the village's old well, a deep black mouth in the earth said to have been sealed centuries ago. As she peered into its depths, a wave of vertigo struck her, visions flashing in her mind's eye, shadows dancing, faces twisted in agony, a darkness rising to swallow the light. The labyrinthine woods that surrounded Hinterkek had become a prison, one forged by ancient rites, fueled by blood debts and betrayal. With trembling hands, Eleanor uncovered a hidden diary buried beneath fallen stones. Pages yellowed and brittle, but filled with desperate scrawls. The writer spoke of a curse, a pact made to protect the village that had instead doomed it, a sacrifice demanded by forces beyond mortal comprehension. As night fell fully, the ground trembled, and the whispers became screams. Figures, cloaked in shadow, emerged from the forest edges, eyes glowing with unnatural light. Eleanor realized the village was not gone. It was trapped, caught between worlds, its inhabitants prisoners of a darkness that had never truly left. She fled into the trees, the screams chasing her through the undergrowth, vowing to expose the truth and break the curse. If she could survive the night. Story: The Last Flight of Dr. Snee Philip. September the 10th, 2001. A day like any other in the vibrant city of New York, yet unknowingly poised on the edge of an unfathomable catastrophe. Dr. Snee Philip moved through her morning with practiced grace, a woman shaped by years of struggle and determination. Born in a small town in India, she had risen above humble beginnings, earning her medical degree from the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine. Her journey brought her to the bustling metropolis of Manhattan, where she had secured a residency at the prestigious Cabrini Medical Center. To her colleagues, she was a dedicated physician, quiet, focused, sometimes reserved, but always compassionate. To her family, she was a beacon of hope and pride. Yet beneath the surface, Snee grappled with private battles, the pressures of her demanding profession, the weight of expectations, and the shadows of a past she rarely spoke of. On that morning, surveillance footage showed her entering a small grocery store near her Battery Park City apartment, selecting everyday essentials. Her movements were calm, routine, a brief respite before the day's demands. But after that moment, the trail of Dr. Philip grew cold. The next day, the world was shattered by the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. Amid the chaos, the search for missing persons became a desperate race against time. Yet, in the overwhelming tide of tragedy, Snee's case was swallowed by the enormity of the disaster. Her family's calls went unanswered. Her apartment remained dark. Officially, she was presumed among the countless victims. But fragments of uncertainty lingered. Whispers began to emerge, rumors of sightings in the days following September 11th. A woman resembling Snee was spotted wandering near a Manhattan hospital, disoriented and pale. Another witness claimed to have seen her near the East River, lost in thought and far from home. The contradictions deepened the mystery. Was she alive? Was she in hiding? Or had something more sinister occurred amid the city's turmoil? Investigators uncovered hints of struggles beneath Snee's composed exterior. A history of battling alcoholism, a brush with the law over a shoplifting incident. These revelations complicated the narrative, suggesting that her disappearance might be voluntary, a retreat from a life fraught with pressure. Yet no contact, no messages, no trace of her since that day. The city had lost thousands, but for those who loved Dr. Philip, the unanswered questions burned brighter than any headline. Was she a victim of the attacks? Or had she slipped into the shadows of a broken world, a ghost haunting the edges of memory and hope? The truth remained elusive, wrapped in the smoke and ruin of a day that changed everything. In the weeks and months following the horrific attacks on September 11th, the city of New York was enveloped in grief and chaos. Thousands were missing, many families were shattered, and the urgent search for survivors and victims dominated every effort. Yet, amid this overwhelming tragedy, the disappearance of Dr. Snee Philip became a whisper, overshadowed by the scale of devastation. Her family refused to accept the silence. Her mother kept Snee's bedroom untouched, a shrine to a daughter whose fate remained uncertain. Photos, personal belongings, and a favorite scarf lay untouched on her bed. Each day without answers deepened the ache of not knowing. Detectives and investigators followed every thread. Witness statements trickled in, some convincing, others puzzling. A nurse at a Manhattan hospital recalled a pale woman who appeared disoriented and in distress, someone who matched Snee's description. The woman had asked for help, but vanished before she could be reached. A taxi driver told police he'd driven a young woman late at night, her eyes vacant and haunted, toward the waterfront, far from her home. These fragments of sightings sparked hope and suspicion in equal measure, but none led to confirmation. The investigation revealed more about Snee's private struggles. Hidden beneath her professional demeanor was a battle with alcoholism, a secret she guarded fiercely. Court records revealed a minor shoplifting charge, a desperate act born perhaps from the weight of pressure and isolation. Friends described her as brilliant but fragile, a woman trapped by expectations and haunted by inner demons. Speculation grew. Had she chosen to disappear to escape the life that suffocated her? Or was she a victim of circumstance, lost in the turmoil of that dark September? Despite extensive searches, no trace of Snee was found. No personal items, no signs of struggle, no body. DNA tests on unidentified remains failed to yield a match. It was as though she had vanished into the ether. As years passed, the case grew cold, filed away as one of the many unsolved mysteries born of that fateful day. Yet for those who loved her, the questions lingered, unanswered and painful. Her colleagues at Cabrini Medical Center remembered her with fondness and sorrow, lighting candles in quiet vigils, hoping for closure that never came. The city around her moved on, scarred but resilient, carrying the weight of countless untold stories like hers. The disappearance of Dr. Snee Philip remains a haunting enigma, a stark reminder of the fragility of human existence and the enduring power of hope amid despair. Some mysteries are never solved. Some lives linger in the shadows between memory and oblivion. Story: The Silent Watcher of the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountains stretched like a vast ancient spine through the eastern United States, a labyrinth of ridges and valleys cloaked in dense forests that had stood for millennia. To the untrained eye, they were a sanctuary of natural beauty. Sunlight filtering through the canopy, streams tumbling over moss-covered stones, the distant call of a hawk soaring overhead. But for those who knew their history, these mountains were more than a landscape. They were a living, breathing entity, steeped in legend and mystery, where the veil between the natural and the supernatural was perilously thin. Jacob Thornton was a man accustomed to solitude. As a wildlife photographer and naturalist, he had spent years chasing elusive creatures and unspoiled vistas. The wilderness was his refuge, a place where the chaos of the world faded into the quiet rhythm of nature. His latest expedition had brought him deep into the heart of the Appalachians, farther than he had ever dared to roam before. On the first day, the forest greeted him with familiar sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of water, the chorus of songbirds. But by the third day, subtle changes unsettled him. The birdsong was noticeably sparse, and a heavy stillness hung over the forest like a suffocating blanket. Even the insects seemed to have retreated into silence. Jacob's keen eyes caught sight of strange signs, clusters of broken branches arranged in unnerving patterns, footprints that appeared human but dissolved mysteriously into the underbrush, and stones stacked in precarious piles that seemed deliberately placed. That night, as the campfire flickered beneath the ancient trees, Jacob felt a presence watching him from the darkness. At first he thought it was an animal, but the eyes that shimmered at the edge of his vision were too large, too intelligent. A low hum vibrated in the air, more felt than heard, a resonant drone that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. It was neither threatening nor comforting, but profoundly unsettling. Sleep was elusive. His dreams were invaded by visions of a shadowy figure, cloaked in mist and leaves, watching silently from the tree line. He saw glimpses of ancient rituals, circle carvings in stone, fires burning in forgotten groves, faces hidden beneath masks of bark and bone. The Watcher was a guardian, or perhaps a predator, bound to the mountain's very soul. Days blurred as Jacob became increasingly disoriented. The labyrinth of trees and trails no longer followed the maps or his sense of direction. Time twisted, hours stretched and collapsed unpredictably. The forest seemed to breathe around him, exhaling whispers in languages older than any living tongue. The Watcher was everywhere, sometimes just a silhouette beyond the firelight, sometimes a sudden movement that vanished when he turned. The line between reality and nightmare thinned. Jacob's grip on his own sanity wavered. Was the Watcher a protector, testing those who dared to enter its domain? Or was it a harbinger of doom, a force that devoured souls and memories? At a forgotten clearing, marked by stones etched with cryptic runes, Jacob found an ancient altar, overgrown but unmistakable. As he approached, the humming grew deafening, a chorus of voices urging him to choose: uncover the mountain's deepest secrets, or flee and never return. Jacob stood at the edge of destiny, surrounded by the watchful eyes of the forest, the weight of centuries pressing upon him. To stay was to embrace the unknown. To leave was to abandon a part of himself forever. The Appalachian Mountains held their breath. The fading light of day slipped away behind the towering Appalachian ridges, leaving Jacob surrounded by the encroaching shadows of the forest. His lantern trembled in his hand, its flickering glow barely penetrating the thick mist that curled around ancient trees like ghostly serpents. The air was thick with a cold that seemed to seep from the very earth itself, wrapping around him like a shroud. Before him stood the ancient altar, massive stones, worn smooth by centuries of rain and whispered prayers. Moss clung stubbornly to the carved runes, their meanings lost to time, but pulsing faintly with an energy that thrummed beneath the surface of reality. As Jacob reached out, his fingers brushed the cold stone, and an icy chill raced up his arm, rooting him in place. Then, from the swirling mists, a figure emerged, a being not bound by flesh, but woven from the mountain's breath and shadow. Its eyes glowed with a spectral light, neither warm nor cold, but deep and knowing, carrying the weight of forgotten ages. The Watcher spoke in a voice that echoed within Jacob's very soul, a tone both commanding and mournful. You have come seeking what is not meant for mortal eyes. The mountains hold secrets, ancient and sacred. To unveil them is to invite chaos and despair. Jacob's heart thundered as the figure's presence enveloped him, pulling him into visions that transcended time and space. He saw primordial forests stretching before creation, spirits weaving life into the soil, and cosmic forces binding worlds together. He glimpsed the delicate balance between life and death, light and shadow, order and chaos. The Watcher offered a choice: turn away and forget what he had seen, returning to the safety of ignorance, or accept the mantle of guardian, embracing knowledge that would forever change him. To wield such power meant sacrificing the very essence of his humanity, binding himself to the mountain's eternal vigil. Driven by a mixture of fear and fascination, Jacob accepted. A surge of energy coursed through his body, sharpening his senses beyond mortal limits. He heard the whisper of every leaf, the heartbeat of the earth beneath his feet, the silent language of the stars. The forest unfolded before him like a living tapestry, revealing its hidden truths. Yet with this gift came a terrible cost. Shadows gathered within his mind, whispering doubts and fears that gnawed at his sanity. His nights became haunted by nightmares, visions of endless darkness, of unseen eyes watching from the void, of voices calling him deeper into oblivion. Jacob was no longer simply a man. He was the Watcher, the bridge between worlds, burdened with a duty older than civilization itself. The mountains had claimed him, their silent sentinel bound to protect their secrets from those who would destroy them. And as the mist thickened and the forest sighed around him, Jacob understood that he could never leave the Appalachians. His fate was sealed, intertwined with the ancient power that had awoken within him. The Silent Watcher had found its successor, Story, the haunting of the embalmed head. The woods of Beaver County in December held an oppressive chill that seeped deep into the bones of those who dared wander beneath the skeletal canopy. Michael's discovery was far from accidental. It was a grotesque beacon calling out to those who would listen. The severed head lay unnervingly pristine amid the decay, a stark contrast to the rotting leaves and broken branches surrounding it. The subtle sheen of embalming fluid coated the skin, preserving every line and wrinkle as though time itself had frozen. The woman's face bore the weight of years, etched with sorrow and quiet dignity, yet her mouth seemed twisted in a silent scream, an eternal witness to unspeakable horror. As news of the find spread, Beaver County became a hotbed of unease. Residents spoke in hushed tones, casting wary glances toward the dark woods that now seemed more foreboding than ever. The police, faced with a case unlike any before, called in specialists from across the state. Among them was Dr. Michelle Vitale, a forensic pathologist renowned for her meticulous work and calm demeanor in the face of darkness. Vitale's examination was both clinical and haunting. The severing was done with terrifying precision. Clean cuts, no jagged edges, the vertebrae carefully separated to preserve the neck's integrity. This was not the work of a common killer. It was a calculated act by someone with intimate knowledge of human anatomy and mortuary practices. The discovery of the eye caps, small, ridged devices designed to hold the eyelids closed, pointed to a mortician's touch. But the replacement of the eyes with small red rubber balls, a child's toy, was a cruel, mocking gesture, a grotesque signature that sent chills down the spines of the investigators. Isotope analysis, a cutting-edge forensic technique, revealed the woman had wandered the eastern United States in the months before her death, never settling, a ghost drifting through states and cities. Yet no records tied her to Beaver County, raising unsettling questions about how her head came to rest in these woods. Toxicology reports complicated the narrative. Trace amounts of medications used for cardiac irregularities suggested she died of natural causes. a victim of fate rather than violence. But then, why the mutilation? Why the preservation? Speculation ran rampant. Some whispered of a black market for human remains, a clandestine trade in bones and body parts for occult or medical purposes. Others feared a serial killer, someone with a twisted obsession with death and anatomy. As the investigation deepened, unsettling details emerged. Funeral homes across the region reported missing supplies and unaccounted for remains, hinting at a wider, more sinister network. Local legends resurfaced, tales of grave robbers, secret societies, and dark rituals performed in the dead of night. The community, gripped by fear and fascination, struggled to reconcile the mundane surface of their lives with the horrific realities unearthed beneath. For Dr. Vitali and her team, the embalmed head was more than a case. It was a haunting puzzle that challenged the limits of science and human understanding. Every discovery raised new questions, and every answer seemed to lead deeper into darkness. And somewhere in the shadowed woods of Beaver County, the truth waited, silent, watching, and unforgiving. As the investigation unfolded, the weight of the embalmed head's mystery grew heavier on all involved. Detective Mark Reynolds, assigned to the case, found himself ensnared in a web that blurred the line between forensic fact and creeping dread. Nights were restless, haunted by the disquieting image of the preserved face, serene yet frozen in silent terror, eyes replaced by lifeless red spheres, mocking the very concept of sight. The team's forensic pathologist, Dr. Michelle Vitali, delved deeper into the secrets the head might reveal. Every analysis seemed to open new wounds, not physical, but psychological. The meticulous severing suggested a perpetrator who had mastered both death and preservation, a duality of reverence and horror. The presence of embalming fluids pointed toward access to professional mortuary practices, yet the grotesque replacement of eyes hinted at madness, or perhaps a ritualistic cruelty beyond comprehension. The small Pennsylvania town's calm was shattered as whispers of the grisly find spread. Locals, once tight-knit and trusting, grew suspicious of strangers and even neighbors. Old legends of grave robbers and occult societies surfaced, rekindling fears buried beneath decades of peace. Among the most chilling discoveries was a series of anonymous letters sent to the police, cryptic messages referencing the Watcher, the Eyes of the Forgotten, and the Price of Truth. The letters hinted at a secret society operating in the shadows, one that trafficked in human remains for purposes both scientific and sinister. Detective Reynolds found himself pulled into a labyrinth far more complex than the physical woods where the head was found. As he pieced together fragmented clues, missing funeral records, unexplained disappearances, whispered threats, a disturbing pattern emerged, suggesting the embalmed head was but one piece in a larger, darker puzzle. The psychological toll on the investigative team was palpable. Some began reporting vivid nightmares of disembodied eyes following them in the dark, of unseen forces pressing on their minds. Others grew distant, consumed by obsession and dread. Dr. Vitali, driven by a relentless need to uncover the truth, descended into her own shadowed depths. In late-night sessions, she pored over ancient texts and forensic reports, haunted by the possibility that the head's mutilation was part of an arcane ritual, a dark pact between the living and the dead. The case culminated in a chilling revelation. A hidden chamber beneath an abandoned funeral home where the investigators uncovered a cache of preserved remains and ritualistic artifacts, evidence of a cult blending death rites with twisted scientific pursuit. Yet, even as the truth emerged, the question lingered. Who was the woman, and what fate had bound her to this horrifying legacy? The haunting of the embalmed head became a symbol, not just of a gruesome crime, but of humanity's fragile grasp on life, death, and the darkness lurking between. Story. The last whisper of the forgotten town. Far from the bustling highways and gleaming cities, nestled in a valley perpetually cloaked in swirling mist, lay a town forgotten by time and memory. Known to only a few as the Forgotten Town, it was a place where the passage of years had been swallowed by creeping ivy, rusted iron, and the slow reclamation of earth and shadow. Its streets, once alive with the rhythm of daily life, now lay cracked and silent, lined by empty houses that leaned with exhaustion against the weight of their own histories. Anna Moreau was drawn to places like this, abandoned enclaves frozen in decay, where every splintered porch and shattered window whispered secrets of lives once lived and stories never told. She was an urban explorer, a chronicler of ghosts in stone and wood, wielding her camera and notebook like a lantern in the dark. The morning she arrived, a thick mist hung low over the valley, diffusing the weak sunlight into a pale grey haze. Each step she took stirred centuries-old dust and disturbed leaves crisp with frost. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, decaying wood, and something else, an intangible presence that seemed to breathe just beyond the veil of fog. The streets were narrow, bordered by crumbling buildings whose faded signs flapped feebly in the cold breeze. The silent facades stared like vacant eyes, windows cracked and clouded, reflecting shadows rather than light. The silence was absolute, save for the soft crunch of her footsteps and the occasional whisper of wind weaving through broken chimneys. As Anna moved through the town's skeletal remains, an uneasy sensation settled over her, a feeling that she was not alone. She paused at a fallen lamppost, the rusted metal curling like a dying vine, and looked around. The mist shifted, and for a moment, shapes seemed to flicker at the edges of her vision, figures half seen, dissolving when met with her gaze. The wind carried faint voices, carried on sighs and distant echoes. They were not words, but fragments, snatches of laughter, a mother's lullaby, a whispered argument, ghostly remnants of the town's vanished inhabitants. Anna's heart quickened. The town's silence was not emptiness, but a presence, a memory etched into the very soil and stone. In a derelict storefront, the cracked glass revealed dusty relics, a child's worn doll, its porcelain face chipped, its eyes staring blankly, a rusted bicycle chained to a broken railing, stacks of yellowed newspapers with headlines long faded to obscurity. On the floor, a leather-bound diary lay half-buried beneath debris. Anna carefully picked it up, its pages fragile with age. The diary belonged to Margaret Fisher, a woman who had lived in the town during its final, tumultuous years. As Anna read by the fading light of her lantern, Margaret's words painted a portrait of a community unraveling. Trust fractured by fear, neighbors turned suspicious, and shadows creeping ever closer. Margaret wrote of strange occurrences, lights flickering in the forest beyond the town, shadows moving where none should be, and whispers heard in the dead of night that spoke of doom. She described gatherings in secret, ancient rituals meant to bind or banish a creeping darkness that had taken root among them. As Anna delved deeper, the voices in the wind seemed to grow louder, more insistent, threading through the rustling leaves like a mournful song. The diary hinted at a terrible secret, a curse or a pact that had doomed the town and scattered its people to the winds. The cold pressed closer as night fell, and Anna found herself drawn toward the old church at the valley's edge, its steeple leaning like a broken finger pointing to the sky. The building's door hung ajar, creaking softly with the breath of the wind. Inside, faded frescoes depicted scenes of salvation and sacrifice, and the scent of aged incense lingered like a fading prayer. In the sanctuary, Anna's lantern flickered, and the whispers converged into a murmur, a collective voice of the forgotten, pleading for remembrance and release. Her skin prickled as unseen eyes seemed to watch from the shadows, heavy with sorrow and accusation. The forgotten town was not just a relic. It was a living tomb of secrets and spirits trapped between worlds. Its last whispers a call for reckoning that Anna could not ignore. Night had fully descended over the forgotten town, draping the valley in shadows so thick they seemed to swallow the weak light of Anna's lantern. The chill deepened, and the forest's breath grew heavy, whispering secrets that seemed to slither along the cracked sidewalks and through the hollow windows. Anna's footsteps echoed hollowly as she retraced her way through the abandoned streets, the weight of Margaret's diary pressing on her mind. The words within told of betrayal, not just of neighbors turning on neighbors, but of darker forces summoned in desperation. Ancient rites, blood pacts, and a curse that chained the town's fate to a cycle of pain and silence. As she approached the edge of the village, the air grew thick with a palpable dread. The trees seemed to lean inward, their twisted limbs reaching like claws. From the shadows emerged figures, not quite human, cloaked in tattered garments, their faces hidden, but eyes glowing with unnatural light. They moved silently, encircling Anna, the cold sinking into her bones. Frozen in place, Anna realized these were the restless spirits of the forgotten town, trapped by the curse that had swallowed their lives. Their whispers grew louder, a chorus of anguish and warning, pleading for release, for justice, for the truth to be unearthed. Summoning her courage, Anna spoke into the darkness, promising to break the curse, to remember the forgotten, to tell their story. The spirits responded with a haunting wail that seemed to shake the very earth. Suddenly, the ground beneath Anna trembled. A fissure cracked open near her feet, revealing a hidden crypt beneath the town. She descended into the cold, damp chamber where relics of the past lay undisturbed, bones intertwined with ancient symbols, remnants of the dark rituals that had doomed the town. As she explored, Anna uncovered the truth. The town's final desperate act to protect itself had backfired, binding its souls in eternal torment. To free them, she would have to face the darkness head-on, confront the lingering evil that fed on fear and silence. With resolve burning in her heart, Anna prepared to fight for the last whispers of the forgotten town, to bring light to shadows long concealed, and finally lay the restless spirits to rest,